Well, what's up, guys? Let's talk about the R10 wildlife review. You know, I've had this for, it's about 2 years now, or no, 1 year. But there's a long story to that. You know, rarely does Canon kind of do something that impresses me with and kind of surprises me with their performance to price ratio. But with the R10, they've actually done it. So before we get into like the specs and how everything works, I'm not going to get into super big detail. I'm going to tell you the backdrop behind my experience with Canon and how this all came out. Roughly about a year ago, let's say back in February, I put out a camera review on the 90D, the DSLR. Is it still worth it? And I gave that camera a really good hype up. Yes, it's worth it, because there's just nothing out right now and the RF mount that kind of competes. No more than 2 or 3 weeks after that camera review, I got in my inbox, Adorama sent me, hey, you can actually pre-order the R7 and the R10. It's like, yes, finally there's a camera there. It was going to be out for 2 or 3 months, but I put in my pre-order for both these. Now these are expensive. This is $1,100. The R7, which I'm filming on with this, is like $1,700, $1,800 because you could only get it with the kit lens. A couple months go by, I'm really starting to think about, is the R10 going to be worth it? Is it going to be just a rebel for another $300 or $400? And in Canon's fashion, what the rebels happen to have as far as tech is they have really slow frame rates, not a lot of buffers. Their viewfinders aren't that great. There's just, the list goes on and on with some of those rebels. They're good cameras, don't get me wrong, but when you compare it against like the 90D, there is no comparison. They really make you jump up in price, size, weight, and everything. So I canceled the R10 about a month before it was released. And through some of the testing of the R7, and I was going to take a trip. In another month, I decided, well, maybe I need a backup camera. Buying another R7 is very expensive at this point, so let's try what the R10 has to offer. I just probably need it for like a talking face, maybe some B-roll. Not going to use it very much. But once I got the camera in my hand and started looking at the specs, I noticed that this camera is not what I expected as far as the capabilities. And within the first 5 minutes, it felt super light, which is a good thing. And then I looked at the thumbstick for the autofocus. I'm like, hey, that's really cool. The ergonomics felt better. Wasn't really all that compromised from the R7. And then put the battery in, started to look at the JPEG buffers, the autofocus, and noticed immediately, like, now this is surprisingly good. Just first initial impressions, right? So I ended up taking a trip, 10-day hike, probably 40 to 60 miles hiking in 10 days, and I started noticing a pattern using these two cameras. Initially I was going to use the R7 for everything, but I kind of ended up using the R10 for a majority of the things I was doing. One, traveling light, hiking. There's a significant difference between the weight of the R7 and the R10. The R10 is much smaller. That being said, some of the things you guys might have reservations against is, going between these two cameras, is it really worth it? Well, the big things that you're going to notice right off the bat is in-body stabilization, 32 megapixels, the video, different type of video you can create with the R7, meaning different quality types, but it didn't really affect any of the things that I was doing. I didn't really miss it all that much. Sure, it's nice having those options, but it wasn't a make or break type situation, which, hey, I love, right? So as I hiked through the mountains, I noticed I counted 4 guys carrying micro four thirds gear, 1 guy carrying a Nikon DSLR, and another one carrying a Canon DSLR. And then me using this. And one thing I noticed right away, I had the 600mm, this is the 800mm, f11, along with the 100 to 400, and it just captured everything that I wanted. Like it just didn't miss a beat. 600mm f11, squirrel shots and video, no problem. Little chipmunks, no problem. The 100 to 400 doing mountain goat photography, not a problem. The video focus on R10 is amazingly good for what it is. I mean, it just locks on, it has the eye animal focus, it tracks, it does everything you want. Stability is really good. It's not as good as the R7, but the lenses absolutely do a very good job. So the image quality is just right up there with the R7. In fact, I think the R10 might have a little less noise, although not as much detail, but I didn't notice it neither way. Going to non-stabilized lenses, or like the 800mm f11 Sigma I have, you'll notice a difference. Going from the 150 to 600 Sigma, you'll notice a little bit of difference with the stabilization. The R7 kind of takes the cake on that, but overall, the things that just blew me away was the buffer, the JPEG buffer held in there. The autofocus, eye animal autofocus, is just as good as the R7 or R5. I didn't really notice that much, which I think Canon, if you're listening, you did a very good job of marketing and giving, I guess, the customers a good feeling that they invested in your system and that. Because in the past, be honest, a lot of times I've invested in some of your cameras like the Rebels or I always feel like you're holding something back on purpose. This felt like it was deliberate, like we know the segment, we know the things you're gonna be able to do and the things you can't do. But I love upgrading for extra features. I don't mind paying for it, but I don't wanna feel like I'm being taken advantage of as if you're a strong arm and you're twisting my arm for that $500 upgrade and it breaks the photography. So I have no problem. But lately, it feels a good 1-2 punch, the R7 and the R10 together for the ultimate kind of wildlife setup. I like it. I'm not very impressed with the R3, the price tag and what you're getting. And the R5 is kind of an ultimate wildlife. You get 8K video and you get all this other stuff, but it's $3,800, or probably about $3,200 now. But this is $1,100, and you get a lens with it. The R7 is probably around $1,700. So where does that kind of leave you? You could probably get two of these along with one of these big dog lenses, an 800, 600. I'm really surprised that these aren't selling more. If you have a chance to put these together, do it. Amazing setup. In fact, this is one of my favorite wildlife setups right here. This is the 100 to 400 with a 1.4 multiplier. Gets me out to 900 millimeters. Think about that. The 150 to 600 gets me out to about 960 millimeters. So that is a huge lightweight. And what I mean by this is for doing hiking and putting it in your lap if you're in the car. I noticed I was using this a lot on my hiking trips, simply the fact it was so light and available, where my R7 had the 800mm hooked up. That was gonna take more deliberate photography of buffalo or pronghorn or antelope, whatever you wanna call it. This was like the ad hoc, where if you've seen a fox or you've seen something that was moving, just grab it and do that. In addition to that, the 4K video is really good out of this, but it has kind of a secret weapon like the R7, which is 4K crop mode. 60 frames a second in crop, 1.72 multiplier. This is the thing. If you do wildlife photography, you want zoom. This setup gets me 1,525 millimeters in 4K video. With this 800mm, it gets me 2,200 millimeters. So now we're talking in the range of the P1000 Nikon, P950 Nikon zoom, and something that's only slightly bigger and great 4K video. Eye animal focus, it just seems to work. So there you have it. I hope I answered a lot of questions real quick. Some of the downsides to this camera: smaller battery, not as many shots, it's not weather sealed, it doesn't have IBIS. The video modes, it has ample video modes, but it's not as generous as the R7 and R5. R5 will do like 8K. The R7 has a whole bunch of different video type modes. This has 2 or 3, which I find is sufficient. Yeah, in the least, I guess the Achilles heel of this, I use this in silent mode, which is electronic shutter. It makes no noise. It's awesome, but there's some serious serious lag or that gelatin effect that you get, you know, slow shutter, that you'll notice. You'll notice that you just kind of have to tighten tighten things up, watch how you're panning with the camera. But other than that, that's probably my biggest gripe of this. I think the video is awesome. Image quality as far as ISO and noise seems just as good, if not better than the R7. The R7 is using 32 megapixels, this is using 24, and it just seems to work well. So there it is. I'm kind of voting this as the best dollar, I guess, one of the best deals for wildlife photography, to be honest. Granted, there's no weather sealing, so be careful with it. But, you know, if you know what you're doing, you can use it for just about anything. Comments, questions, guys, below. Hit that subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next week.